There are habits that don't just make you look weak, they announce to the world that you've surrendered. Quietly, repeatedly, without even realizing it. You don't have to fall apart, raise your voice, or get knocked down to lose respect. All it takes is a handful of small, daily behaviors that slowly drain your presence, dilute your influence, and shrink your inner power. And the worst part, society often claps for them. It tells you that being agreeable, always explaining yourself, or laughing to keep the peace is kindness. The Stoics, they saw it for what it is, self-betrayal in disguise. This video isn't about chest-thumping bravado or macho pride. It's about what not to do if you want to keep your strength unshakable. I'm going to show you 6 habits that quietly erode your authority, not just in other people's eyes, but in your own. If you've ever felt invisible in the room, unheard in conversation, or uncertain about why people don't take you seriously anymore, this one's for you. If you're done performing strength and ready to live it, like this video, subscribe for unapologetic Stoic clarity and drop a comment. No more weak habits. Let's begin. On over-explaining yourself. One of the subtlest habits that drains your authority, often without you realizing it, is the urge to over-explain yourself. You say something simple, but instead of letting it land, you scramble to soften it. You start justifying, you add disclaimers, you rush to explain your reasoning like you're on trial for your own decisions, and in that moment you don't sound confident, you sound unsure. You don't look strong, you look like you're still asking for permission. This isn't harmless communication, it's a subtle confession that deep down you're afraid of disapproval, and that fear weakens you. Not because it makes you emotional, but because it makes you forget who you are. When you feel the need to explain yourself over and over, what you're really doing is imagining resistance that hasn't happened yet. You're arguing with ghosts, defending yourself against judgments that may never even come. And as Seneca wrote, a man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. You suffer twice, once in your imagination and again in reality, if it even arrives. The truth is, the need to explain stems from an untrained relationship with discomfort. It's easier to pile on words than to sit with silence. Easier to clarify endlessly than to allow others to misunderstand you without apology. I remember watching this happen to a man I respected deeply, David, a retired Marine turned teacher. Every time he introduced a new idea in the classroom, he'd begin with, "This might not be for everyone, but," or, "I don't want to offend anyone, however." At first it felt like humility, but over time those disclaimers eroded his presence. His words sounded hesitant, not because his message was weak, but because his delivery begged for approval. One day a student told him bluntly, "You always sound like you're waiting for someone to stop you." That hit him hard. Not because it was disrespectful, but because it was true. The Stoic doesn't speak to be accepted. He speaks to be understood, and sometimes not even that. Because the point isn't to make everyone feel good about your truth. It's to live your truth clearly enough that it no longer needs an introduction. The discipline here is in restraint, in saying only what is necessary, in letting your actions speak louder than rehearsed apologies. When you speak with ownership, you don't chase clarity through repetition. You set a boundary with your words and allow people to sit with them, even if they squirm. Especially as we grow older, this habit becomes more ingrained. Many people in midlife and beyond feel the social pressure to soften, to over-accommodate, to explain away their decisiveness in the name of politeness or not making waves. But that's not virtue. It's dilution, and if you're constantly afraid of being misunderstood, you'll never be respected for what you really meant. So here's the shift. Speak less, but mean more. Say what is true, then let the discomfort land. If someone's peace is shaken by your clarity, that's not your responsibility. Let them wrestle with it. You're not here to keep the room calm. You're here to walk with truth. Now let's move to the next habit that masquerades as charm but quietly eats away at your self-respect. The smile you wear when nothing's actually funny. Because sometimes laughter isn't light. It's a signal you've learned to submit. 2. Laughing at things that aren't funny. Psychologists have found that people often laugh not because something is funny, but because they feel anxious or socially pressured to conform. This kind of laughter, known as self-regulatory laughter, doesn't come from joy or connection. It comes from fear. And the moment your body is forced to perform humor for safety, you've exited authenticity and entered submission. That's not charisma, it's a mask. A signal that you'd rather sacrifice truth than risk disapproval. And while it might buy you a moment of social comfort, it costs you something far greater, your integrity. The habit of laughing at what isn't funny, at passive-aggressive jokes, subtle insults, condescending remarks, quietly trains the people around you to keep testing your boundaries. Each time you chuckle through discomfort, what you're really doing is saying, "This is okay with me," even if your gut screams otherwise. This isn't kindness, it's compliance dressed as pleasantness. And with enough repetition, it sends a message to the world that you'll betray your instincts just to keep the peace. The Stoics were not emotionless statues. They valued presence, awareness, and inner calm. But they had no interest in pretense. Marcus Aurelius didn't laugh to smooth over tension. He didn't flash a grin when injustice stood in front of him. The Stoic smile is not forced. It's chosen. It is measured. It comes from alignment, not performance. Anything else is theater, and living your life as an actor quickly erodes your sense of self. This is especially important as we age. In youth, people often laugh to be liked. But as we grow older, many fall into the habit of laughing to avoid isolation. They don't want to be seen as bitter, unlikable, or rigid, so they tolerate more than they should. They chuckle through disrespect, stay silent in the face of rudeness, and become the easy company who's never offended. But the cost of that image is self-erasure. You weren't put here to be agreeable. You were put here to be real. The next time you catch yourself laughing at something that insults your values, take a breath. Don't react. Don't perform. Let silence say what your nervous smile can't. Because silence, in the hands of someone who knows their worth, is more powerful than 1,000 agreeable gestures. Next, we'll examine a behavior that appears modest on the outside, but reveals deep insecurity underneath, asking for permission to live life your way. Because when you constantly seek approval to be yourself, you've already told the world you don't belong to you. 3. Asking for permission to be yourself. There's a specific kind of weakness that doesn't show up in your posture, your voice, or even your actions, but in the way you seek permission to exist. It happens every time you hesitate before expressing your truth. When you modify your plans so they don't offend, or when you soften your decisions to make them more socially digestible, you think you're being considerate. What you're actually doing is asking the world for permission to be who you already are. And the more you do this, the more people sense it. They might not say it aloud, but internally they register your uncertainty. They feel your neediness, and nothing makes a person look more forgettable, more dispensable than needing to be approved before being authentic. The problem with seeking validation is that it never ends. The more you ask people to affirm your life, your values, or your direction, the more they believe they have the right to shape it. You become manageable, predictable, non-threatening. You stop acting from principle and start performing for comfort. That's not Stoicism. That's emotional dependence wrapped in politeness. A Stoic doesn't ignore people's opinions, but they don't need them either. Their path is carved by reason, not by popular vote. Epictetus warned us to be content to be thought foolish. That's not a call to rebellion. It's a reminder that greatness rarely looks like agreement. If everyone nods at your choices, chances are you've watered them down, you've stripped away the edge that made them yours. Authenticity is uncomfortable, not just for others, for you. It forces you to face disapproval without panic. It requires you to hear judgment without reshaping yourself to avoid it. But without that discomfort, there's no identity, just projection. This becomes more critical as we age, because the older we get, the more we want peace. And sometimes we confuse that desire with the need to keep things pleasant. But pleasantness isn't peace. It's just the absence of friction. And if avoiding friction means slowly erasing yourself, you're not aging with grace. You're disappearing with a smile. A Stoic doesn't check the temperature of the room before they speak. They don't ask if their boundaries are too much. They don't apologize for how they live. They embody the truth quietly, even if it stings others' comfort, because they understand something most people never do. Approval is temporary, but self-respect is permanent. If you've been playing small just to keep others calm, it's time to stop negotiating your values like a politician. You're not here to entertain the crowd. You're here to walk your path, with or without applause. In the next section, we'll expose another subtle gesture that signals weakness, one that seems harmless but erodes presence every time it's avoided: eye contact. Because when you can't meet someone's eyes, what you're really avoiding is yourself. 4. Avoiding eye contact. Avoidance is one of the most silent betrayals of self-respect, and it often reveals itself in the smallest act: looking away. Not because you're distracted, but because something in you retreats the moment another person's eyes meet yours. It might happen in conversations with someone who intimidates you, or with someone whose approval you secretly crave. You feel your gaze shift, your posture soften, your presence fade. And before a word is exchanged, you've already spoken volumes. Whether it's fear of conflict or fear of being truly seen, that subtle withdrawal tells the other person something you never meant to say. I'm not solid in myself. Eye contact has never been about dominance. That's a myth built on ego. Its power lies in presence. It's not about trying to control the room. It's about proving that you're in the room. When you hold someone's gaze, not with aggression, but with calm, you signal to them and to yourself that you are mentally still, emotionally composed, and anchored in your own clarity. But when you drop your gaze too quickly, especially during discomfort, you give away more than power. You give away certainty. And in a world that reads non-verbal cues faster than dialogue, certainty is currency. I remember watching a man in his 70s speak at a veterans meeting. He was soft-spoken, humble, and not particularly physically imposing. But when he spoke, he held eye contact like a man who had nothing left to prove. Not frozen, not forced, just unwavering. He didn't rush to respond. He didn't fidget. He simply remained fully there. You could feel it in the room. People paid attention not because of his volume, but because of his presence. Later, someone asked him what his secret was. He said, "You've got to stop flinching at other people's eyes. They're not mirrors unless you're hiding something." That stayed with me, because that's the core of Stoicism. Not flinching, not hiding, not outsourcing your confidence to someone else's reaction. The Stoic meets discomfort face to face, not because it's easy, but because anything less would be a retreat from his own integrity. As people age, many unconsciously start withdrawing, not just socially, but psychologically. They begin to avert their gaze more often, as if shrinking themselves is a form of peacekeeping. But the truth is, this shrinking invites disregard. When you avoid being fully seen, you teach people that your presence is optional. So next time you feel that urge to look away, pause. Stay still. Let the moment pass through you. Let their discomfort pass through you. Let yours too. Because the person who can hold their ground in silence while looking another human being in the eye has already won half the battle of life. And speaking of boundaries, let's talk about another behavior that disguises itself as humility but rots your authority from within: apologizing for your standards. Because the moment you defend your discipline, you've already made it negotiable. 5. Apologizing for your standards. One of the most damaging habits you can carry, especially as you mature, is apologizing for the very standards that have kept you sane, strong, and grounded. And it often doesn't sound like a formal apology. It's subtle. It sneaks into conversations like, "I know I'm kind of strict about my routine," or "I know this might sound weird, but I don't really watch TV anymore." Harmless, right? Not quite. Because each time you preface your boundaries with embarrassment or justification, you're communicating that your discipline is something you feel ashamed of. And the moment you do that, the people around you assume it's negotiable. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you protect your peace. You don't have to justify why you go to bed early, say no to drama, spend time alone, or choose to eat with intention instead of impulse. These aren't quirks, they're values. And values don't need a press release. They don't need to be explained, softened, or presented in a more palatable way. The people who pressure you to explain yourself don't care about your growth. They care about their own comfort. And when your standards disrupt their comfort, they respond with sarcasm, passive-aggressive remarks, or distance. That's not your cue to shrink. That's your test to remain still. Stoicism teaches us to live in accordance with nature. Our own inner nature, not someone else's emotional weather. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be good, first believe that you are bad." Not in the sense of self-hate, but in the sense that virtue requires honest correction. And once you've corrected course, once you've built standards that reflect your values, the next step is non-negotiable. Hold them, not with pride, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. People without discipline often attack those who have it, not openly but through subtle guilt. They'll say you're too serious, too rigid, too distant, but what they're really saying is, your self-control makes me uncomfortable. And that discomfort, it's not your responsibility to soothe, it's theirs to confront. Seneca once said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Your standards will create friction. Good. Let them, because if your boundaries don't make weak people uncomfortable, they're probably not strong enough to protect you. The older you get, the more society expects you to soften, to let things slide, to be more agreeable, to stop trying so hard. But that's not wisdom. That's erosion. Your discipline is not a phase. It's your compass. And it doesn't need permission to stay firm. So stop apologizing for waking up early. Stop softening your habits so that people with no direction feel less threatened. You're not here to make people feel better about their chaos. You're here to live with clarity. In the next and final section, we'll confront one of the most deceptive habits of all, the desire to be liked by everyone. Because the moment approval becomes your compass, you'll be lost forever. 6. Trying to be nice to everyone. Studies in behavioral psychology have shown that people pleasers often report higher levels of anxiety, resentment, and emotional fatigue than those who set clear boundaries. Why? Because when your primary goal is to be liked by everyone, you inevitably fragment yourself into smaller, more manageable pieces, just so others won't feel uncomfortable. And the more you do this, the more invisible you become. Niceness, though celebrated in many cultures, is not inherently a virtue. In many cases, it's a socially acceptable form of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen in your full, unfiltered truth. When you constantly bend to meet the comfort of others, you stop living with clarity and begin living in negotiation. You begin filtering every decision through the imagined opinions of others. And the most dangerous part? It feels like peace. But it's not. It's silent self-abandonment. It's self-erasure, dressed in politeness. People say things like, "She's so nice," or "He gets along with everyone." But underneath that praise is often a person who's never really shown up fully. Because full authenticity always offends someone, not because it's unkind, but because it's honest, and honesty will always make the insecure squirm. Stoicism doesn't concern itself with surface-level acceptance. A Stoic isn't guided by applause or offended by silence. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That means living in alignment with truth, even if it costs you approval, especially if it does. Because approval gained by performance is temporary, and it always comes with a leash. One day you'll wake up and realize you've been nodding your way into irrelevance, your opinions diluted, your values blurred, your presence unnoticed. The Stoic path demands that you stop asking if everyone's comfortable with who you are. You're not here to be agreeable, you're here to be anchored. That means speaking when it's uncomfortable, disagreeing without apology, and standing still when the crowd moves without thought. And when others call you difficult for doing so, take it as a sign you're on the right track. Because if no one is challenged by your presence, you're likely not showing enough of it. For older audiences especially, this habit becomes deeply embedded. Many have spent decades avoiding offense, staying neutral, and trying to be the easy one in every room. But aging doesn't mean softening. It means sharpening. It means refining your clarity, not reducing it to please people who can't handle truth. Respect doesn't come from being nice. It comes from being real. Now, as we close, we'll bring all 6 habits together, not just as a list of what to avoid, but as a powerful call to reclaim the clarity, discipline, and presence that Stoicism demands. Because true strength isn't in how you perform, it's in how you live when no one's clapping. If any of these habits hit a little too close to home, good. That means you're still awake, still self-aware, still brave enough to face the little cracks that have been stealing your strength in silence. Because weakness doesn't always come with a collapse. It comes with a slow compromise, a little extra explaining here, a forced smile there. And before you know it, you've been performing for the world and disappearing from yourself. But here's the Stoic truth. You don't need to be louder, flashier, or more agreeable. You need to be clearer, more deliberate, more anchored in who you are, not who they want you to be. Real strength isn't something you put on. It's what remains when you stop faking it. So if you're ready to drop the habits that dilute your presence, hit like. Subscribe for more raw, unapologetic Stoic clarity, and comment below, no more masks. Because the world doesn't respect the version of you that plays small. It respects the version that stands still, silent, disciplined, and absolute.